Chosen one, you did not find this message. This message was sent to you. Before you explain that away, before the part of your mind that likes to organize things begins listing the ordinary reasons you ended up here, I want you to stay with that for just one moment, because what brought you here today is the same thing that has been building in your chest for the past several days. The same weight, the same unnamed heaviness that is not quite fear and not quite grief, but something that sits right at the center of your chest and will not be reasoned away no matter how many times you try. Your body already knows that Friday is not ordinary this time. And the part of you that is spiritually awake, the part that senses things before they arrive, the part that carries a weight belonging to something larger than this moment, that part of you has been trying to get your attention for days now, maybe longer. This message is what your attention has been needed for, because what is approaching this Friday carries a weight that runs through sacred history, through the human nervous system, through every tradition that has ever understood one quiet truth before the greatest emergencies. There is always one night that feels like horror, one threshold that most people mistake for destruction. I am here to tell you what that horror actually is. And when I do, nothing about this Friday will feel the same. Stay with me. Every word of this was meant for you. Now, before we go any further, I want to say something important. If you stay with this message all the way to the end, here is what you will leave with. You will understand the real meaning of what Friday carries and why the weight you have been feeling is not a warning. It is a preparation. You will have a specific way to audit what needs to be released before Friday arrives. And near the end, I am going to share something about a God-given frequency that science has recently uncovered. Something that changes how you enter what comes next. What is at the end is as important as what you are hearing right now. Do not leave early. Now let me talk about something most people in your life have not been able to address. Because most people around you have not been able to see what I am about to name. Your body has been speaking to you, and I want to translate what it has been saying. The first thing is the fatigue, not ordinary tiredness, not the kind that a good night of sleep fixes. This is something that lives deeper in the bones, in the cells, there when you wake up, and still there when you finally stop moving at the end of the day. You have been trying to explain it as stress, as overwork, as the weight of too much life packed into too little time. But that is not what it is. Your system is processing something enormous right now, and the physical fatigue is simply the evidence of that invisible work happening inside you. That is not weakness. That is not illness. The second thing is the emotional waves. They come without warning and without a clear reason. One moment, you are fine, and then, suddenly, there is grief, a grief that has no object, that you cannot attach to anything specific, and then it passes, and something that feels almost like hope moves through you, quiet and fragile, and you are almost afraid to acknowledge it because it feels too tender to touch. You have been wondering if something is wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. Your frequency is recalibrating. Your inner world is doing what it must do to prepare you for what is coming through on Friday. That is not instability. The third thing is the dreams. They have become more vivid than usual, more present. The kind of dreams where you wake up and for a moment you are not entirely sure which world is more real. Sometimes you are searching for something in the dream, a place, a door, a person, and it feels deeply familiar but just out of reach. Your inner world is already seeing what your outer world has not yet caught up to. Something is being revealed to you in the night that your waking mind has not fully received yet. That is not random. The fourth thing is that your tolerance has shifted. Things you used to sit with, certain conversations, certain environments, certain dynamics, they now feel suffocating in a way they never did before. You are not becoming difficult. You are becoming discerning. What once felt like home now feels like a place you have already left, even if your body is still there. And that ache of no longer fitting where you used to belong, that is not something broken in you. That is not anxiety. And the fifth thing, the hardest one to describe, is the physical tension that rises when you think about the future. A tightness in the chest, a breath that does not go all the way down, a bracing, as if some part of you is already preparing to absorb an impact that has not arrived yet. Every system around you will tell you this is a problem to be managed. But I want to offer you something different. Your body is a prophet. It is sensing the weight of what is approaching before your conscious mind has the words for it. And what it is detecting is real. None of this is random. Not the fatigue, not the waves, not the dreams, not the change tolerance, not the tightness. Not one of these things is arbitrary. Every single one of them is the body of a chosen one, doing exactly what it is built to do when an appointed moment, a charged, spiritually significant, irreversible moment, is near. And before I tell you what Friday truly holds, I need you to understand something that has been happening in the silence. Something about what has been forming in you during the season that led to this moment. Because what unfolds on Friday will only make full sense when you see what has been quietly building in you during the days that came before it. Everything I just described, the weight in your body, the waves moving through you, the dreams, the shift in what you can tolerate, the tightness. When you look toward Friday, all of it is connected to something that has been happening in the hidden place, in the quiet, in the season that felt like nothing was moving and nothing was coming. That season was not empty, it was full. Let me tell you what it was actually doing. The first reason the wilderness existed was not to break you, it was to expand you. Because you cannot carry what is coming with the container you had before this season began. The capacity you will need for the weight, for the responsibility, for the depth of what is about to be trusted to you, it could not simply be handed to you. It had to be grown in you. And growth of that kind does not happen in comfort. It happens in the slow, quiet pressure of a season where nothing seems to be working and everything seems to be waiting. You were not being diminished out there. You were being stretched into someone who could hold more than you ever have before. The second reason the wilderness existed was to strip away what was never truly yours. And this is the one that hurts the most, because some of what was stripped felt like it belonged to you. Relationships that felt permanent, identities that felt like home, ways of understanding yourself that felt completely true. But they were too small. Not bad, too small. And what is on the other side of this Friday cannot be carried by the version of you that needed those things to feel whole. What felt like loss was actually shedding. What felt like rejection was actually redirection. What felt like abandonment was actually an appointment being cleared of everything that would have held you back from it. The third reason was to recalibrate your frequency. The quietness was not absence. The silence was not punishment. It was alignment. A tuning process, the kind a musician knows. When a string is brought to exactly the right tension, not a fraction more and not a fraction less, and the note that comes from it is finally perfect. That is what this season has been doing to you. Not punishing you, tuning you, preparing the instrument before the music is released through it. There is a man whose story holds every one of these things at once. His brothers threw him into a pit. He was sold. He was falsely accused. He sat in a cell for years with a promise over his life and no visible evidence that it would ever arrive. And then, not gradually, not with a slow build that made logical sense, suddenly, in a single day, everything shifted. Not because the timing was convenient, because the appointed moment arrived. because the formation was complete. He was stripped of everything that was not truly his. He was expanded past what his old life could have produced. He was tuned in the silence until the note was perfect. And then his Friday came, and he was ready. The version of you that entered this wilderness with certain attachments, certain ways of protecting yourself, certain things you needed from other people to feel real, that version could not have walked through what is on the other side of this Friday. But the version of you that has been forming in the quiet, the one sitting here right now carrying a weight most people around you, cannot see that version is ready. Even if you do not feel ready, even if nothing about this moment feels like what you imagined preparation would look like, readiness for the chosen one has never been a feeling. It has always been a fact that the feeling eventually catches up to. And part of what had to go in this season was the version of you that needed to be understood. The version that explained yourself over and over to people who had already decided what they thought. The version that stayed in conversations that had already ended, trying to make someone see what they were choosing not to see. The version that made yourself smaller so the room could feel comfortable. The version of you that needed external confirmation to trust what you already knew had to go. The version of you that carried other people's definitions of who you are had to go. The version of you that dimmed your own knowing because the people around you could not confirm it had to go. Not because those things were shameful, because they were too small for the door that is directly in front of you right now. There is a process that humanity has always understood, but rarely names correctly in a spiritual context. It is the process of birth. It matters here because of this. The most intense part of birth, the part no amount of reading can fully prepare you for, is not the beginning of labor. It is the transition, the final hours before arrival, the moment where the pain becomes something beyond what language can hold, where the body is doing something the mind cannot fully keep pace with, and where everything in you wants to stop, and the only thing that carries you through is knowing that something real is about to come through. Friday is the transition, not the beginning, not the end, the transition. And the weight you have been feeling, the dread that has been building quietly underneath your days, that is not a sign that something is going wrong. That is the contraction. And what is coming through on the other side of it has been forming in you during every single day of this season. And I hear the Spirit saying to the ones who have carried this long season, the ones who stayed when staying cost something real, the ones who chose to trust when everything visible said not to, I have not forgotten you. The delay was never rejection. Every day of that silence was a day of formation. And what I am sending you into on this Friday, you are ready for it. Not because it is easy, because you have been prepared for exactly this. Now, let me tell you what Friday truly means. I need to take you somewhere. Most teachers stop before they ever reach it, because this is the part that changes everything. Everything you have understood about the weight you carry and the moment that is almost here. Most people go through their entire lives using one word for time. The ancient Greeks used two. The first word is chronos. Chronos is the time that everyone lives in. It is the clock on the wall, the days moving forward one after another in sequence, one week becoming the next, one season folding into the one that follows it. Chronos is ordinary time. It does not discriminate. It does not carry any particular weight. It simply moves forward, steady and even. The same for everyone, whether anything of real significance is happening or not. Most of the world operates entirely in chronos, and there is nothing wrong with that. For most people, but the second word changes everything, kairos. And kairos was not about how long something lasts or what comes after what. Kairos is the appointed moment, The moment that is charged with something qualitatively different from the moments around it. The moment where the invisible and the visible briefly touch each other and something irreversible occurs. The ancient world understood that not every moment carries the same weight. That some moments in a life are simply different, not because of what is on the calendar, but because of what has been prepared, and for whom, and by what force. Kairos does not arrive on a schedule. It does not build gradually in a way that logic can follow. It arrives when the formation is complete, when the one it is appointed for is ready, whether they feel ready or not. And one of the things the chosen one learns to recognize, slowly, over the course of a long preparation season, is the difference between Chronos Fridays and Kairos Fridays. This Friday is not Chronos. I want you to hear what that means across history, because the pattern is not a coincidence, and it is not something anyone invented to make a point. On a Friday, the most significant weight in human history was carried by one man, and what looked to every witness present like absolute devastation was actually the mechanism through which the most irreversible transformation the world has ever known was set in motion. On a Friday, Joseph received the summons that moved him from a prison cell to the most powerful position in the known world, not through a gradual process, not through a series of logical steps that anyone could have predicted, but in a single appointed morning that came without warning. On a Friday, David walked toward what an entire army had been retreating from for 40 days, not because he had superior training, but because something had been formed in him in a field that no one recognized as preparation for a battlefield. The weight you feel before a Friday like this one is not random. It is not anxiety that needs to be managed. It is recognition. The part of you that is spiritually sensitive is detecting Kairos before your conscious mind has the words for it. That detection is not a problem. It is your most important asset going into what this Friday holds. Now I want to take you one layer deeper, because the Hebrew calendar holds something that most people walk past without realizing what it says. In the ancient Hebrew understanding of time, the day does not begin at sunrise. It begins at sundown. Darkness first, and then light. Not because darkness wins, but because that is the order in which new things are always born. Every day begins in the evening, moves through the night, and arrives at the morning. The darkness is not the absence of what is coming. The darkness is the womb of what is coming. Friday evening in the Hebrew calendar has a name, Erev. It means the preparation, the threshold before. And Erev was understood not as empty waiting, but as a sacred act of readying the time when everything unnecessary is set aside, when attention is gathered, when the space is prepared for what is about to fully arrive. What you have been feeling in the days leading up to this Friday, the weight, the heaviness, the sense of something approaching that you cannot entirely name, that is your Erev. That is your preparation evening. Darkness arriving not to destroy what is in you, but to announce that the light that follows it is closer than it has ever been. Friday does not belong to the darkness. Friday is the final hour of the Erev, and what has always followed the Erev, across every tradition that has ever understood sacred time, is emergence. I want to give you 3 truths about this Friday. 3 things you can carry into it that will change how you walk through it. The first truth is that Friday reveals what you are actually made of, not what you show on ordinary days, not the version of you that manages and performs and holds things together for the sake of everyone watching. What you are made of underneath all of that, the real substance that is there when the pressure is real and comfort is gone. The chosen one has always been tested at the threshold, not to prove their weakness to someone else, but to reveal their own strength to themselves, because there are things inside you that you do not yet know are there. Things that were formed in the wilderness but have not yet been called on. Friday is when you find out they exist. The second truth is that Friday strips what was never meant to cross with you. Every identity that was borrowed, rather than genuinely yours. Every belief about yourself that came from someone else's fear or limitation. Every way of being that you carried because it was expected, but was never actually true. Friday holds all of it up to the light, and what cannot survive the light of a genuine Kairos moment was never meant to survive it. This is the part that people have been calling horror, but it is not destruction. It is precision. It is the most loving act of preparation, the removal of everything that would have weighed you down on the other side of the door. The third truth is that Friday is always the last night before the shift. There has not been a single turning point in sacred history that did not have a Friday attached to it. The darkest moment, the longest silence, the place where everything visible said it was finished. And then, on the other side of that night, something emerged that the darkness could not have produced and could not have contained. Before Friday arrives, I want to walk you through something I am going to call the threshold audit. It is not a complicated exercise. It does not require anything from you except honesty, the quiet, private kind that you can hold right now, exactly where you are, without moving. The first question is this: what are you still carrying that you were meant to set down somewhere in this season? Not because carrying it was wrong, but because somewhere inside you, in a place you have not been fully listening to, you already know it was not meant to come with you through the door that is directly ahead. Sit with that for just a moment. You do not need to solve it. You only need to honestly name it to yourself, inwardly, right now. The second question is this: who have you been performing wholeness for? Not living it, performing it, showing up as settled when something in you was still searching, as fine when the weight was real, as ready when you were still afraid. You do not need to say the answer out loud. You only need to be honest with yourself, in the quiet of this moment, about whose eyes you have been performing for, and whether you are willing to stop, starting now. And the third question is the one that cuts deepest. What are you afraid that Friday will expose about you? Hold it. Do not move past it, because here is what I have seen over and over again. That fear is almost never pointing to something that needs to be hidden. It is almost always pointing to something that simply needs to be healed, or honestly acknowledged, or released from a grip that has lasted longer than it should have. The fear is not your enemy. It is a map. And the thing it is pointing to that is exactly what Friday is coming to address. Breathe, right where you are, and let that settle without forcing any conclusions. The answers will find you. What mattered was that you asked. Now, earlier in this message I mentioned something. I told you I had come across a finding from a neuroscience laboratory. Something about a specific frequency of the human brain, and what that frequency means for a person standing at exactly the kind of threshold we have been describing. I said I would come back to it. I am almost there. But first I need to show you the deepest truth about this Friday, the one I have been building toward since the very first word, the one that recontextualizes everything we have covered, the wilderness, the signs in your body, the Erev, the stripping, all of it, because this is the truth that changes not just how you understand Friday, it changes how you understand yourself. So now you have the Kairos. You have the Erev, you have the three truths, and I imagine some part of you is beginning to feel like the pieces are falling into place. But I have not told you the deepest layer yet, and everything I have said until now, every piece of it, was building to this one thing. Let me tell you what the horror actually is, because most people who sense something heavy approaching Friday spend all their energy trying to brace against it, trying to manage it, minimize it, get through it as quickly as possible. And in doing that, they miss the most important thing about what it is. The horror that attaches to a Kairos Friday is not a sign that something is going wrong. It is the most reliable sign that has ever existed that something is going right. Think about the last hours before a birth, not the beginning of labor. The transition, the final hours before arrival. The part where the intensity becomes something beyond what the mind can fully keep pace with, where the body is doing something enormous, and the person going through it has no more options except to stop resisting and let the process do what it came to do. In those final hours, nothing looks like it is working. Everything feels like it is too much. And then something that did not exist before comes into the world and is suddenly, undeniably, irreversibly real. Friday is the transition, not the ending, not a punishment, not evidence that something has gone wrong. The transition, the final contraction before what has been forming inside you for an entire season, comes fully through. The first layer of what the horror is, it is the contraction, the tightening that comes immediately before emergence, the intensity that means what is being born is real and it is close. Every time you have felt the pressure building this week, every time the weight became something you almost could not carry, that was not the darkness winning, that was the delivery getting closer. The second layer of what the horror is, it is the release of the last thing you were holding that was never meant to cross with you. Not the obvious things. You released those earlier in the wilderness. This is the last one, the deepest attachment, the thing you held so carefully and for so long that it started to feel like part of you. Friday asks for it, not cruelly, necessarily, because your hands need to be empty to receive what is on the other side of the door. The third layer of what the horror is, it is the final test of whether you will trust what you cannot yet see. Not when it is easy, not when the evidence is clear, but right now, in the Erev, in the darkness before the morning, when everything visible still looks like it might not turn out the way you were promised. That question, will you trust, is not a test of your intelligence. It is a test of your formation, and the wilderness was building the answer in you for exactly this moment. You went in carrying what was not truly yours, and you are coming out with only what actually belongs to you. You went in needing to be understood by people around you, and you are coming out knowing that the only understanding that was ever required was your own. You went in afraid that the darkness was the final word, and you are coming out knowing that the darkness was always the first word of a new day. There is a young man in sacred history who stood in front of something that an entire trained army had refused to face for 40 days. He was not a soldier. He was a shepherd. But something had been formed in him during the years in the field that no one watching him that morning could see something that was real, even though it was invisible. Something that the wilderness had built in him without any of the recognition or the applause that would come later. And when the Kairos moment arrived, he did not run toward it because he felt no fear. He moved toward it because the formation was complete, because what the field had built in him was stronger than what the battlefield was asking for. That formation, the kind that happens in the hidden place, in the quiet, in the seasons that look like nothing, that is what you have been in, and it produced something in you that is stronger than what this Friday is asking you to carry. I want to tell you about a woman. She was 38 years old, and she had spent years searching meditation retreats, healing practices, every framework for spiritual connection she could find. She was not cynical about it. She genuinely wanted to find the thing that would make the connection feel real and not like something she was performing. But nothing fully arrived. There was always a gap between what she was told she should feel and what she actually felt. She came to a Friday that was unlike any other. Something in her life, something she had held for years as a source of identity, dissolved completely. not gradually, suddenly. And she said later that she nearly did not make it through that night. But she did, and what she described on the other side was not a logical transformation. She said it was as if the universe began speaking to her in a language she finally understood, as if something in her had opened that none of the retreats or practices had ever been able to reach. Not because those things were wrong, but because they were preparing the surface, while something deeper waited to be unlocked. And the unlocking came on the other side of the hardest night she had ever known. She did not find her breakthrough when she was comfortable. She found it when she chose to stop fighting what Friday was doing and let it complete what it came to do. And this brings me back to what I promised to return to, the finding from the neuroscience laboratory. Because what the researchers discovered is directly connected to what that woman experienced and to what is available to you on the other side of this Friday. Your brain operates on a frequency, not metaphorically, literally and measurably. Scientists can attach electrodes to the skull and watch, in real time, which frequency the brain is running on and what that frequency produces. And among all the brainwave states that have been studied in laboratories, at MIT, at Harvard, at Princeton, at Stanford, and at research centers in Berlin, there is one state that stands apart from all the others. The researchers call it gamma. Gamma is the frequency of clarity, of insight, of that rare condition where the mind is both completely alert and completely open, at the same time, where solutions appear that the analytical mind alone could never have constructed, where connections form between things that ordinary thinking keeps separate, where the inner voice becomes not a whisper, but a steady, clear knowing that you can actually follow. The ancient traditions have always had a word for this state. Scientists now have a measurement for it. And here is what those studies found, consistently, across decades of research at some of the most respected institutions in the world. Every child is born with gamma dominant. This is why children learn at speeds that adults find astonishing, why they experience the world as vivid and alive and full of possibility in a way that most adults have lost access to, why their intuition is sharp, their creativity is natural, their connection to what they cannot fully explain is immediate and real. And then something happens, not suddenly, gradually, beginning around the age of 7, as the pressures of ordinary modern life increase the demands of performance, of conformity, of fitting into systems that were not designed. With gamma in mind, the brain slowly begins spending less and less time in that state. The researchers have a name for it. They call it the decline effect, and what it produces in the person who experiences it is exactly what you have probably felt at some point in your life. The sense that something that used to come easily has become unreachable, that the clarity and the connection and the aliveness that were once natural now require enormous effort to access at all. Now here is what I need you to understand specifically as a chosen one, because this is not the same for everyone. The person who is called the one who was born with a sensitivity to things that others cannot perceive, the one whose inner world has always been richer and more active than the people around them, could understand that person was born with gamma stronger than average. That is what made the gift what it was. The intensity of perception, the depth of feeling, the way knowing arrived before the evidence did. Which means that when the decline effect happened, when the world slowly turned that frequency down, the gap between who you were as a child and who you became as an adult was not the same gap that other people experienced. For you, it was wider. The distance between the version of yourself that felt fully alive and the version that has been pushing through every day carrying a weight that most people cannot see, that distance is the distance of gamma. And that heaviness you have been carrying, that sense of being below the level you were born for, that is not a character flaw. It is not a spiritual failure. It is a frequency that has been running lower than it was designed to run. I want to tell you about something. A neuroscientist named Dr. Robert Lake, 34 years of dedicated research, spent years studying one specific question. If gamma is the frequency that produces this level of clarity, of insight, of what mystics have always described, and what science can now measure, what is the most direct path back to it? Not through years of disciplined meditation, not through expensive clinical equipment. What is the most accessible way to return the brain to the frequency it was always designed to carry? What he developed is called the Genius Song. It is not a meditation. It is not a mantra. It does not require you to change your routine, to wake up at a different hour, or to learn a new practice. It is a 7-minute audio track listened to through headphones, with the eyes resting, that uses a technology called brain entrainment to directly and gently guide the brain back into gamma frequency, the same frequency the research at MIT and Princeton and Harvard measured, the same state that the woman I told you about was trying to access through years of retreats. The technology works by embedding specific tonal patterns into the audio that the brain naturally synchronizes with the way a tuning fork causes nearby strings to vibrate at the same frequency without touching them, directly, measurably, without requiring anything from you except 7 minutes and a pair of headphones. I know what some of you are thinking right now, because I thought the same thing. You have tried things before. You have invested in practices and approaches that promised something and delivered something smaller. And the exhaustion of being disappointed is real. I am not asking you to set that experience aside. I am asking you to consider one distinction. Meditation, practiced consistently over months and even years, can eventually move the brain toward gamma. The research supports that. But what brain entrainment does is not the same mechanism. It is not asking the brain to gradually, through its own effort, find its way back to a frequency it has not accessed in years. It is directly driving the brain to that frequency, the way a GPS does not ask you to find your own way. It simply guides you there. The mechanism is fundamentally different, and for a person who has been trying sincerely through everything available to them, that difference matters. 18,366 people have now used the Genius Song. The woman I told you about was one of them. What she described as the universe finally speaking to her in a language she could understand, that was gamma returning. The clarity, the connection, the sense that the internal static had finally quieted enough to hear what had always been there underneath it. For those who are sitting with the question of cost, let me put it in context. A single session of clinical biofeedback therapy, which is the most established clinical method for accessing these frequency states, runs approximately $300 per session. Home biofeedback equipment, if you were to purchase it, runs upwards of $7,000. The Genius Song, the full technology, the same principles, compressed by Dr. Lake into a 7-minute track, was priced at $49. And, for the people who have come through this message specifically, he has set it at $39. Not as a marketing device, because he wanted the people who were genuinely ready, who had been brought here by something other than ordinary browsing, to have access to it at a price that would not be the reason. They said no to something that could genuinely serve them. With that $39, you receive the track itself, a second audio track specifically designed for children to support focus and confidence, the original book that the film The Secret drew from, which is a substantially more practical and grounded text than what the film conveyed, valued at $20 on its own, a guided visualization for the 4 primary areas of life: and an infographic of the 5 most important practices for building toward the life you are moving into. All of it. And it is backed by a complete money-back guarantee with no conditions and no time limit. You can use it as many times as you want. If something in you does not recognize a difference, you simply ask for your money back. You do not lose anything, except the reason for not trying. One thing I want to be direct about. There are websites and offerings that use the name Genius Song that do not contain the actual brain entrainment technology. They are audio files in name only, without the embedded frequency patterns that make this what it is. The only source that carries the full and verified technology, all 4 of the bonuses, and the complete guarantee is the link I have placed in the pinned comment of this video. Please do not search for it anywhere else. What you would find elsewhere would not be what I am describing. If something in you is being drawn toward this, if what I have described about Gamma and about the frequency available to you on the other side of this Friday resonates with something that has been looking for a name, the information is in the pinned comment. Explore it only if you feel genuinely called to. The decision belongs entirely to you. But I want to say this. Every day that the gamma frequency stays at a lower level than it was designed to run is another day you carry more weight than you need to. Another day, the internal static makes the inner voice harder to hear. Another day, the clarity that is available to you remains just out of reach. The person you are in the process of becoming, the one on the other side of this Friday, has already decided this is worth exploring. Not because they were certain, because they understood that the right moments never arrive feeling perfectly comfortable. They arrive feeling right. And here is what I hear the Father saying over every chosen one who has walked through everything I have just described, who has endured the wilderness, who has carried the weight of the Erev, who is standing at the threshold of a Friday they did not fully choose, but somehow always knew was coming. I see the formation. I see every night you chose to stay when leaving felt easier. I see what the quiet season built in you that no one else around you has been able to see yet. And what I am sending you into on this Friday, you are ready for it. Not because the weight is light, because you are not the same person you were when this season began. Go forward. What I placed on the other side of this door, I signed your name on it before you were ever afraid of it. Now let me tell you who you are on the other side of this Friday, because that is what everything, every word of this message has been building toward. The horror was the delivery room. I want to say that one more time so it lands completely. What you have been calling dread, what you have been bracing against, what you gave a name you were not sure was right, that was not darkness claiming you. That was the final contraction of a birth that has been in progress for longer than you know. And what comes through on the other side of it is not a repaired version of who you were before. It is someone entirely new. Someone who could only have been produced by exactly the process you went through. You did not survive this season. You were delivered by it. There is something you are, not something you are becoming, not something you are hoping to eventually grow into. Something you already are, right now, that this season revealed even as it tested you. The first thing you are is a seer. You sense what others cannot. You feel what others walk past. You know things before the evidence arrives. The weight you have been carrying this week, most people around you cannot feel it because they are not built to. You are. And what feels like a burden in ordinary seasons becomes your most essential tool at the threshold. You are not oversensitive. You are accurately calibrated for the kind of moments that ordinary sensitivity cannot navigate. The second thing you are is a spiritual warrior. You do not collapse under pressure. I know it has felt like you might. I know there have been moments in this season where the ground under you felt like it was disappearing, and there was nothing solid to stand on. But you are still here. You kept going when you had no visible reason to. That is not stubbornness. That is commissioned strength, the kind that was built precisely so that it would be available exactly when you needed it most. The third thing you are is a light bearer. Every space you enter is changed by your presence, not because you perform anything, not because you try to be a certain kind of person, but because of what you carry. Friday will not extinguish what you carry. Friday will be the moment you finally discover how much of it there actually is. The fourth thing you are is a cycle breaker. What ends with you is not your failure, it is your assignment. The patterns that could not follow you through this threshold, the inherited ways of moving through the world that were never yours to begin with. They are ending because of you, not despite you. Your refusal to keep carrying what did not belong to you is an act of freedom, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. And the fifth thing you are is a pioneer. You go first, without a complete map, without the guarantee of applause from the people who cannot see yet what you are building toward. You go into the territory that has no established path because someone has to go first. And what you are willing to do in the dark makes the way visible for the ones who will follow. That is not a small thing. That is the most costly and the most essential role there is. Now, I want to address something that I know some of you are carrying underneath everything else. Something that sits alongside all of this identity and all of this calling, a guilt that has been following you quietly through this season. The guilt of pulling away, of not being as available as you used to be, of protecting something in you that you cannot fully explain to the people who expect access to you. I want to name it directly. You are allowed to outgrow people. You are allowed to outgrow the places that once felt like home. You are allowed to outgrow the version of yourself that needed to be everything to everyone in order to feel like you were enough. You are allowed to protect what is being built in you, even when the people around you do not understand what you are protecting or why. You are allowed to become quieter than you used to be, more selective than you used to be, less available than you used to be, because what is being formed in you requires that kind of care. You are allowed to cross this threshold without taking everyone with you, and you are allowed to arrive on the other side completely changed without owing anyone an apology for who you became. Boundaries are not betrayal. Distance is not rejection. Silence is not cruelty. These are the costs of elevation, and they are worth every difficult conversation, every misunderstanding, every moment someone could not follow where you were going, because what is on the other side of this Friday is worth it. Before I close this message, I want to give you something to carry into Friday with you. Not information, not analysis. Something you can feel. I want you to build something in your mind right now, exactly where you are, without moving, without closing your eyes, if that is not available to you, just in the space of your inner attention. Imagine that you are standing at a door, not a dramatic, cinematic door, a real one, ordinary in its appearance, but charged with something that you can feel even from where you are standing. On the other side of it is Friday. On the other side of it is the version of you that this entire season was building. Now feel what is standing behind you, not as weight, this time, as foundation. Every night in the wilderness that you chose to stay when everything in you wanted to leave. Every moment of that season where you kept something alive inside you that had no visible reason to survive. Every version of yourself that had to be released so that this version, the one standing at this door right now, could exist. Feel all of that as ground under your feet. Solid, real, earned. Now look at the door and notice that there is light coming from underneath it. Not blinding, not overwhelming, just enough. Just enough to tell you that the room on the other side is real, that what is waiting there has been waiting for you specifically, that it was not built for someone else and given to you by accident. Feel the stability in you right now, the quiet thing underneath the fear that does not shake the way the fear does. That steady thing that has always been there, even in the worst nights of this season, that is not something you manufactured. That is formation. That is what the wilderness produced in you. And it is exactly what the other side of Friday requires. You are ready. Not because it does not cost anything, because you are no longer the person who could not afford the cost. I hear the Father saying to every one of you who carried this message all the way to the end, who stayed even when staying required something from you, I am not sending you into Friday alone. I was in every day of the wilderness. I am in the Erev, and I will be on the other side of the door when you walk through it. What I have prepared for you there, I prepared it knowing exactly who you would be by the time you arrived. Go. You are ready. You have always been ready. This Friday, you are ready. Take that with you, not as information, as identity. You are a chosen one. You were built for Kairos moments, not comfort moments. And Friday, this specific, weighted, charged, appointed Friday, is yours. The light is already on. The door is already open. All that remains is for you to walk through it and find out what you were always made of. Go, and be everything this season of formation produced in you.